Welcome back to our conversation with Wiehahn from CrossBoundary. In episode 1, we explored Wiehann's journey from studying law to becoming a global talent acquisition specialist and the inside story of CrossBoundary's diverse, impact-driven business. He unpacked what makes the company's culture so strong, why people are drawn to its mission, and shared candid thoughts on how AI is reshaping job applications in the recruitment process. In the second episode, we shift gears from background and big picture insights to the practical side of hiring at scale. Wiehahn takes us through the key KPIs and OKRs he uses to measure recruitment success, how to embed culture and motivators into your hiring process, and the signals top talent looks for when assessing your company. So let's dive in. Wiehahn, we spoke about competency-based interview questions, and you had highlighted the need to have a structured approach in assessing softer skills or characteristics needed to succeed in a role. Like you rightly said, that soft skills often determine one's success or potential non-success in a role. So Wiehahn, on this topic, again, like you said, it's only a matter of hours or interviews that you really have to get to know someone. I'm always so interested to unpack this. I mean, how do you really assess if someone fits a company culture? And are they going to really fit well into the team and complement the dynamics of that team? How do you tangibly assess company culture in the interview process? What do you need to look out for? What kinds of questions should you be asking? And what are some of the answers that you're expecting out of them?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to these kind of questions, there's a couple of practices that one can follow that just tend to give you a little bit more insight. So the first thing is, again, on the past behaviors aspect. So don't ask someone what they would do or what they will do or what they should do. Ask them what they've done. It's much better for someone to give you the closest example of what they've done in the past related to what you've asked them if they have no direct example than hearing a theoretical response.
Yes.
And there is a place for, more theoretical kind of responses and everything. And, not all aspects of the role, have the same weighting when it comes to your experience versus your ideas, right? But especially when it comes to these softer things, asking people, how they have behaved is much more informative. Then asking a question where it forces someone to avoid a generic answer is also something that is very helpful. So, certain questions, especially given the amount of information that's available to people these days, are like known, Even if you type into AI now, I'm interviewing for this job, like, what kind of questions would they ask? It's the similar ones, tell me about a time where you've influenced a senior. So avoiding questions where obvious response, where there's a clear right answer, is also very helpful. Because what you want is authenticity in that moment. You want to see what someone actually thinks and feels and does. And what I also think is really important is like, it's not wrong or right. It's not like maths where, you either know 100% of it or 50%. It's totally possible for these kind of qualities for someone to just not be a fit for a certain organization where they'll be amazing elsewhere. And I think it's really important to be authentic and to seek authenticity when you ask the questions, because again, you are using very limited data to potentially make a massive decision for both parties. So, give someone the room to give you something that is meaningful and authentic. Like, whatever that may be for you, whether that's, asking a question that's really difficult for them, or asking a question that's maybe more a little bit around something interesting where all you really want is to be excited when they're done talking. There's different ways to go about it, but my sort of guiding light would be to really focus on this authenticity and trying to get a response that is truly reflective of this person when you ask those questions. And the way you do that, make it based on past behaviors where you can, and make it a question where there's no obvious response. I mean, sorry, last example here is just, I remember even since like university, people putting weaknesses on their, what was it? They were running for student council, and everyone had the same weakness: struggle to delegate, and I'm a perfectionist. Like by now, those answers are almost meaningless in a sense because
It's so
um,
true.
no, it's so associated with kind of the right thing to say, right?
Yeah,
Where it's not necessarily that if that happens, I immediately think, oh no, but it doesn't give you kind of that authentic feel that
yeah.
a different answer could.
Yeah. And you also, I mean, earlier on, you were talking about how cross boundary, that culture is so embedded in the person, and having that feeling of, contributing to a greater goal. I mean, is there anything or any sort of elements of assessing there that you can talk about that speaks to marrying the motivators to the company culture and sort of looking at it from that perspective?
Yeah, it speaks to two of the things that we've touched on. The first thing is that de-risking practical aspect that we touched on. We spoke about, KPI measurement.
Mm,
Part of that, is understanding why someone would potentially join your company, right? People join for tons of different reasons. Obviously, the main one is, financial. We all, most of us need to get paid to make a living. But then there's a bunch of other pieces that also play a massive role. And understanding why someone would potentially join your company, understanding that why is super important in managing, not only the candidate experience, but having someone join who, joins for the right reasons, is aligned, less surprises, everything. So really understanding that why helps you to also position yourself in a more, you know, sort of successful way. I want to almost say, like, if I know that this person would need to take a salary reduction to join us, then I'll make sure that we can speak to them about the things that could maybe motivate them to join us, like the team, the project, whatever. So don't shy away from those conversations with people. Have them early and double down for, like, get something authentic. Really try to understand that part because it really forms the foundation. It's not something that is nice to know. You really
yeah,
need to understand why someone is joining you, what they want from it, and whatnot, right? So I think that's really important. And if that's on your mind, if you give respect to the fact that this is a long-term decision, little information, it almost feels to me like you'll have to ask authentic questions. You will want to double check responses. You won't just be comfortable with the generic or the boilerplate or whatever. So, like, while I can suggest one or two questions specifically, I really think the main thing is to focus on authenticity. Ask the questions related to your company that you feel will get you the most authentic responses. And if you view the hiring decision with the kind of seriousness that I think it should have, I think those kind of questions and checks will also come a little bit more naturally to
yeah.
anyone involved in the process.
Yeah. And that, I mean, sort of what I'm taking away there is that a lot of that company culture and motivators needs to intrinsically be embedded into that recruitment process, and
Oh,
making sure that
absolutely.
it's consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different, like, yeah, absolutely. Make sure that your recruitment process, the folks that, your candidates are going to speak to are reflective of your company,
Mhm.
different cultures, different perspectives, whatever, make sure that, from your side, you are giving an interview process that is as much reflective of who you are as an organization as well. And be consistent. Like, if you are clear on your own culture and what makes someone great at your company, it also makes everyone pull in the same direction when you're interviewing. Um, like, we already have the shared framework of what makes someone great or what tends to make someone really successful with us. So if you have really strong views on that and it's crystallized throughout the company, it helps you when you are doing screening because you tend to have similar views and you highlight similar issues and whatnot. Obviously, then there's a chance that you maybe miss something a little bit. However, if you do have those things in mind, I think it helps you to make better hires.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely, I mean, advice to companies is go beyond just they must be a go-getter, or, I like to work extra hard or whatever, to go beyond that and make sure that it mirrors.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's another thing that I'll mention, just, on a more specific note. I think references reference checks that you do before you usually make a hiring decision where you're phoning people that have worked with this person. I think people sometimes underestimate that step. I think apart from, double checking your findings of this individual, um, that you've now seen in the interview process, you get the chance to ask someone who's known them for very long, like, what makes them really happy? What motivates them? Like,
Yeah,
what are no-nos? Um, I think it's such an important part of the whole process, not just to make sure that you have the right hire, but to make sure that that person, once they've joined, is, as happy as can be, and they have the right networks and support and
they
everything.
thrive.
Yeah,
I suppose that's also like, yeah, marrying that whole process together and making sure, it's an end-to-end engagement. And Vian, one of the
yeah,
other things that I wanted to ask you, I mean, many candidates, they now actively assess company culture during the hiring process. What do you think are some of the signals that top talent picks up on in the interview process as red and green flags by the hiring managers? What have you started to notice that candidates are really diving into for information to assess if a company culture is really for them or the company
sure,
in essence?
sure. Yeah, 100%. Um, so these days, almost 90% of the people I speak to have gone to our website and have had a look. And that's kind of the basis for a lot of the conversations, right? So just on a very practical note, I think it's, non-negotiable to have a culture piece on your website. You can go really expansive, but like at a minimum, kind of what's important to us, or what it's like working here, kind of thing. Because I think each percent of candidates I speak to go and check that. So really important.
Yeah.
Then I think very clear outcomes of a position. If I speak to a candidate and let's say we don't have a job description specifically ready yet, but we know that it's going to be ready in a week. So I'm starting to reach out to one or two people who I know could be great. It's always just a less meaningful and more difficult conversation before you are super clear about what you want from the person, right? So I think, build your pipeline and everything and be clear with people if you are just reaching out for conversations as opposed to for a role specifically. But once you start formally engaging, have clear outcomes. And secondly, the most frequently asked question I get at the end of an interview, so much so that started preempting it, is what's the process. So
Yeah.
um, another thing that I think is really helpful is as soon as possible, if you can, put it on the job description, whatever, but lay out the process for the person, how many steps, who they're going to be speaking to, what is the timeline, and then stick to that, obviously. And if you can't update folks that then um, I think giving feedback is also something that I think is really important. So a green flag is certainly the more specific your feedback can be. I think that there's this fear from folks sometimes that maybe my thing wasn't even reviewed at all, or that I completely bombed that, So
Yeah.
if you just give people as specific feedback as possible, I think it helps them as well, to not only have a good view on your company, but also, on themselves and their potential going forward. And then I think another really important green flag is speaking to someone not only about their first year at your company, but speaking to them about growth. It kind of connects with the whole incentivization and the financial aspect, which I think the more clear you are as an employer, the better. If you are always open to negotiation, I think it makes life more difficult. Um, so anyway, just be very clear and transparent on the salary parts that you know already, and always speak to people about the potential growth avenues that they could have if they do well. Tell them about your performance review process, that kind of thing. I think people really view that as green flags, and then red flags. Big one is on consistency. Um, it is uh, it's a big red flag if for example, I say to someone that our budget for a role is X, and then when we want to make an offer, it's less.
Yeah.
Even if maybe at the kickoff of the process they would have been happy with less, it's like it's a red flag for folks if there's not consistency in the information they receive. And then I think another thing that maybe employers can focus on. I'll actually rather mention this as a green flag is a diverse team that interviews you. So if I think people more and more want to feel like they belong in the workspace, and I think if you see a really diverse team when you are interviewing folks from different backgrounds and whatnot, I think it gives you confidence as well that you'll also find your place to belong somewhere where if everyone that interviews you, looks the same or has the same culture and you are different to that, maybe you have more worries about whether you'll fit.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on that note, I mean, it's also a personality thing. So if you are interviewed by the same people with a certain type of personality archetype, you're going to be worried, are they going to listen to me? What does that look like? I'm scared of dealing with people that are X and X type of personality, and that tends to be the majority. And a lot of companies really need to start thinking about using the whole brain of their employees. And that means that people can have different personality types, but as
Yeah.
long as they're aligned with that culture and vision and mission,
Mhm.
that's exactly what you want, I guess.
Oh, Lindy, I can't agree more with you. I find one of the things that sometimes is brought up, when it comes to DEI, people often will almost contrast. Oh, and just to be clear, this is not cross-boundary. This is elsewhere. Like people will contrast hiring the best person versus like DEI. And that to me is so false. Like
Yeah.
the whole point is like a new perspective, varied perspectives, diversity adds, it makes the
Yeah.
sum greater than the parts. Like there's so much more that you gain from that. So yeah, that just hit a note on me, like personally, but yeah.
I love that. The other thing I also want to sort of ask around is, I mean, over your plethora of years in the recruitment and talent acquisition space, what do you see besides pay and benefits? I don't want to talk about pay and benefits anymore. What are
Mm-hmm.
the real reasons people leave companies? From a leadership perspective, what should they, leaders within companies be, what skills and traits should they be building on?
So really interesting question. And yeah, I I think especially if you're working with people that are brilliant and that are used to being exceptional, they probably have like a track record from who knows back when of, being top of class or, exceptional. Um, I think something that every professional wants is to be recognized for their work and the ability to do so with as little friction as possible.
Yeah.
And I think especially the people who are really good at what they do. Like,
Mm,
so one of the things that I've seen to be really motivating is the ability to grow. So, like if you can say to someone that, like your your work will be measured frequently, which allows us to then see your great work. You will have this many, you have this feedback session at a cadence
yeah.
where you will be able to speak about your work. Like if you do well, this is what happens. These are the steps next to you. These are the steps after yours. Maybe you're at this level now, but this is what comes after. These are the competencies we want to see for you to get there. Like,
Yeah.
I have so many of these conversations, and often I can see, or let me rather frame it this way. Because I was an external recruitment consultant, I still sometimes get calls from people thinking that I'm still in that role, and they will ask me if there's any positions out there. And that is often done after a bad day at their current job, right?
Yeah.
Your boss sent you a nasty email, you jump on the phone and see what other options do I have, right? Um,
Cool, doctor.
the Yeah,
Doctor
exactly.
talent.
Dr. Job, no way. Yeah. So,
Need a
um,
bypass.
yeah, exactly. That reminds me of like I once I sent an email to a client in my previous company, and they replied, and when I scrolled to the bottom, I saw my name wasn't Wiehahn De Jager anymore. It said Wiehahn the Hunter in my own email. And I got
Take
such
it.
a fright. I was like, what? Have I been sending this to other people or something, right? Long story short, this person had an auto translate and they had read my surname as Jaeger or something like German or whatever and just translated it to the hunter. And I had to like phone her and like tell her like, please note that's only on your side. I do not go by Wiehahn the Hunter. Anyway,
It could be a great name for recruitment.
or maybe in the Marvel universe, but anyway. Yeah, when people phone me or whatever, let me rather just put it this way. When people are open to exploring other things, it's more often to do with their view on what comes next than their view on what is now. They report things like, despite this in this conversation, I still haven't been promoted and I don't know what I need to do to get there. Or, this decision was made and I wasn't the selected person and I don't know why. Like I have no idea. Like I've done all my projects well,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So the more clarity you can have around progression and what comes next for a person and how they are recognized for their good work, I think that keeps people around. And obviously, if you can speak to people about it ahead of time, it also gets them to join.
Yeah, I think that recognition is so crucial because, people want to feel like they've done well and they need that feedback if they've done well. So it goes a long way. And on the other side of it, mentioning that, unpacking those reasons for leaving. A lot of companies, we chatted about metrics to pull into their recruitment strategy, but maybe those reasons for leaving should also be pulled into their culture strategy and make sure they address it to become learning organizations that nip that in the bud and that don't have people leaving.
Yeah, yeah. No, they're really true, Lindy. Absolutely.
And then, Vian, we running short on time here, but there's definitely
Sure.
one question that I want to ask you before we come to a close.
Mm-hmm.
The climate change sector in Africa is obviously scaling really fast, and talent churn is costly. From your vantage points in talent acquisition, what trends do you think will shape how climate-focused firms compete for talent in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's super interesting, Lindy. That's really true. Like you see so many people moving from, different companies within the space, whether that's now in the investment or IPP or engineering, whatever cycle. It seems to be, the case that the talent is obviously limited and, people index more and more on prior experience. And for that reason, a lot of, cross movements are happening. So if I speak to retention first, I think, a lot of what I've just mentioned around the recognition, the clarity, the platform to speak about what you do. Basically, people who are excellent will do excellent work and then they can get the platform to talk about it as well. And it also just allows them to focus on the things that they should be doing, like the work itself. So I think those platform, the recognition is something really important to keep people. Um, I think then, secondly, um, I think being really intentional about your positioning as well. So it's linked with what I chatted about earlier when it comes to really understanding the why of someone and why they would join your organization.
Mm.
You could have one person on your engineering team who, desperately wants to become a professional engineer. And for that reason, they need to work under, someone who's already got their designation and whatnot, and your company has one. And now they get their professional engineering degree. Now, if you didn't check with them ahead of time how important that was to them, you won't know that a big reason why they were at your company is now gone, right?
Yeah.
Which makes retention more difficult. So that's just one example. There could be another one where someone wants to desperately work on hybrid technologies. Now your company is strategically shifting to only solar. That means that you may lose that person. So really understanding why people are working for your company, what it is that they want to develop or achieve or so, I just think really helps with the retention perspective as well. I was just thinking a little bit about like the whole counter offer practice that happens as well, and I just always find that to be Like my view is that an employee, whatever you want to call it, should do whatever they like. They could really prioritize looking after themselves. That's my view, right? But I do think sometimes accepting a counter offer can be detrimental to, the company making it and the person accepting it sometimes. So yeah, I don't have a clear enough idea on that really to speak to it, but there is something to me almost like, as soon as you go back and, your colleagues know that, you were willing to leave and that you're probably now on much more money. Your managers know that you were willing to leave. And not that that's an issue. Again, like I feel like people should have all the rights to, in whatever the way they want, maximize their return on their time in their professional lives. But I do wonder about the precedent it sets as well if you are doing counter offers for someone as well. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, Lindy, that wasn't very clear.
No, I think that's really a good point, because I was actually chatting to someone about it today, and I think, if they leave or if they're coming, they got to be there for the right reason. So if they're leaving, and it does come down to their counter offer aspect, then they are likely being paid, under market related salaries, and they've got to have a good reason. And it's not just that creating that precedent of I want more money, and it's the same for, we spoke about those motivators.
Yeah, 100%, Lindy. I think that's exactly it. Yeah, it just, as a recruiter, there's so much bias that I imagine people think I have, right? Because normally a counter means, a role reopens, but that's really not where it's coming from. Like, again, I think people should do whatever they, maximize your value. I'd really believe that. I just almost feel like taking a counter offer. There's that saying, you can't step in the same river twice. Um, yeah.
But Vian, it's been amazing having you. And just for all our listeners, so thank you also for being here. I really appreciate it. For all our listeners, where can they connect with Vian De Hunter or Wiehahn De Jager?
Please never connect with Wiehahn Hunter. But Wiehahn De Jager, I am on LinkedIn. I mentioned earlier I'm the fourth son in my family, so my spelling is really strange. But yeah, Wiehahn De Jager, CrossBoundary. I'm based in Cape Town as well. I have my number and my email on my LinkedIn account. So I love speaking to people about their careers, really. So if anyone ever wants to just, reach out and learn more about CrossBoundary, and, maybe I'll obviously have my questions too. Always feel free to do so. There's a reason I've put it up there. And yeah, Lenny, that's the only platform I'm on, really. I need to up
Awesome.
my game a little bit, I think, but that's the only platform I'm on. I'm behind the scenes on Reddit as well, but like there's nothing that will make me give away my account name. So yeah.
No, that's perfect. But yeah, thanks again, Vian. And thanks to all our listeners. And we were glad to have you with us. And remember to follow our LinkedIn page for the latest news and updates, or subscribe to our podcast for more interesting conversations. Thanks so
Awesome. Thank
much,
you so
Vian.
much, Lindy. This was a lot of fun chatting, and thanks again. Yeah, we'll catch up soon.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Okay, bye.